Good afternoon, everyone. As you would have heard, we are the last team for this afternoon. And so for that reason, I just wanted to ask if anyone, put your hands up if you wanted to have a quick stretch. Anyone? Okay, there's a couple of us. Only the people who put their hands up. Could you guys stand up just in your spot? Thank you. Just arms up in the air, 2 big punches for data security and also informed consent, and then take a seat down again. Thank you, guys. I just wanted to check, because today we're going to talk a fair bit about personalization. Because personalization is incredibly important when it comes to dealing with the data of people in our nation. Because there are so many different personas you have to deal with, and the degree to which they differ in their calculus is quite significant. So with that, we'll jump into it. My name is Tom. I'm here with Kim, Danelle, and Chad, and we are the UQ Health Economics team. So to start with, we'll be addressing stream number 2, and in doing so, we're going to be acknowledging the primacy of informed consent over just achieving consent, which we think is quite important in the context of this Nudgeathon. So with that, I wanted to pass to Danelle.
Thanks, Tom. Framing is such an important part of understanding the problem that we presently face. Reflecting back on Uwe's presentation about the gorilla on the court, in this particular problem, patients are the gorillas. We all want access to the abundance of data, and we know that the data is available. But in focusing so heavily on the rules around passing the ball from one team to another, we miss the patient, the epicenter of what all of this research is actually for. It is their information, and they have a right and a say in how it's used. Nothing about us without us. The main issue is the number of different stakeholders with competing priorities and conflicting concerns. So the problem of engagement and consent is not a patient, customer, or user problem, it's a researcher one. Why should patients care? How can we nudge them to care? Now, this is not a simple question of opt-in, opt-out framing or achieving a tick in the proverbial ethics box, but consideration of the thoughts, feelings, and concerns of health consumers when it comes to their data. The Digital Health Charter gives us signposts as to what customer concerns are in relation to health data access, and these should inform the design of any interactive platform. This experience is more than an introduction to information. It is an interactive and immersive experience that encourages information seeking and establishing relationships between customers, clinicians, and researchers, while providing self-efficacy and autonomy for all system users. Our platform design suggestions contain nudges carefully aimed at each stage of the patient journey through health research engagement, beginning with an initial hook, progressing through initial engagement, and ensuring understanding of consent, entering a loop of continual growth as health customers continue to contribute their voice to the research community. The rest of the team is now going to walk through each stage, finishing with an explanation of the nudges we recommend in platform design.
Okay, so the first stage, we plan to make use of existing Queensland Health assets in the waiting rooms. The advantage of waiting rooms is that they're easy for patients, they're already there. We can make it attractive by using posters and attractive videos there as well. It's also timely. When you're in a waiting room, you don't have much else to do. You're probably on your phone already. So you've got a captive audience there for those few minutes, up to potentially an hour or so that you're in the waiting room. It's also here that the priming starts. You're in the environment, you're in a medical environment already. You've got doctors and nurses in uniform. So in effect, we can use the authority bias for good. Okay, so we continue the priming. As you can see on the left of screen, we've got a little bit of a fun educational fact about research and how it has improved over the years. But it didn't just get there. The way that got there, we have a little quick quiz combined with pre-existing Queensland Health data that puts people into different cohorts and shows them a fact relative to their situation. So it's here that we further personalise the experience.
The next step in the customer journey after we've captured people in the waiting rooms is to actually get them into the provision of their consent. And so what this looks like is, first of all, the stratification of people into different personas and demographics through which we can provide them with a more tailored consent-giving experience. We're going to do this in 2 ways. First of all, we want to make sure that different people are provided first with the information on the consent forms that is most relevant to them. Because one thing we know is that different people care about different aspects of the consent process. For example, you've got people who might be very wary of what their research is being used for because of like moral objections to those research aspects. And then also we've got people who might, as we heard in an example earlier, be out in the middle of nowhere and be the only person of a certain illness in that area and be wary of the manner in which their data is stored and the capacity to be interpreted. We also know that people tune out of the consent process when they get far down that big meaty form. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that our consent forms are chunked into modules that are topic-based and can be allocated and changed in their order and delivered to consumers in a way that best maximizes their retention of that information and their engagement with it. The second way that this provides a benefit to our consumers is it gives us the capacity to provide personalized priming. As Chad mentioned before, a really powerful tool that we'll want to use to encourage engagement and then also as a corollary to encourage actual consent giving is to provide that priming material. But we also note that that priming material can be personalized to the interests of the individual or to that demographic that they might represent. This is currently stunted by an inability to understand what the consumer is, the demographic for which the consumer sort of belongs. And we want to do that by providing a short little quiz or by fishing through the data that we already have about these consumers in their health records to provide this tailored experience. And there are a manner of ways to do that sort of provided above. And to conclude with that one, the two big important benefits of stratifying our consumers is an increase in the engagement of what's important to them in the consent process, and secondly, getting more effective priming. So now to move on to our third recommendation. Once we've got consumers on board and we've given some consent, a really key part of this is roping them in again and again and engaging them in an ongoing and dynamic consent process. The way we want to, there are two hurdles to this currently. First of all, we've got the cognitive overload of a whole bunch of consent information coming at them. And secondly, and more importantly, apathy towards like an ongoing consent process, particularly when you want to use your data again and again, and it's like not contingent upon like your visit to the doctor. So how do we do this? Well, we want to integrate a little tool into the IEMR sort of platform that we're building, a tool which represents the way in which your consent process is managed, and this is a tree. So this tree navigation tool will look like a little tree that a consumer grows over time as they provide and engage in more consent activities. The base of the tree will represent some of your long-standing and sort of blanket long-term consents, and you will have like branches, foliage, and things like apples, which will represent the different project-based consents you give your like sort of consent to or engage in at least. And that does two things. First of all, it has this modularity and simplicity which appeals to those who are technically like illiterate and like have trouble going through these big forms. And secondly, you get buy-in because of like sort of completion bias and also just because it's a proxy for wealth and whatnot. And so for that reason, we think this would be a great addition. I'll pass on to Kim.
I just want to highlight that the idea behind this whole nudging process and the idea of our platform is how do we gonna engage consumer in a process of not only consent, but understand how the data is used and how they can actually be part of the research process. So at the moment, as Danelle said, that the consumer is obviously there for their data, but they actually not there for their co-design process. And from my experience working with a lot with consumer, the main concern is actually related to whether or not their data is given, but they are not actually consulted to know what health researches has been done or what is benefit for them. So in order to go through all of that, we believe that we try to use a bunch of nudges and to overcome the cognitive bias. All of them is related to either the endowment effect, which is when you're growing a tree and you feel the loss of it and you want to continue to grow. The other is related to the framing effect and try to improve the ability to join into the process and consent.